So this week I've been working on developing content for my chemistry and AP chemistry classes. Both of those classes I've been teaching with a version of the flipped classroom model for well over 5 to 7 years now, something like that. And so when we went to distance learning, in a lot of ways, the transition was really smooth because I already had a catalog of videos. My students were already used to doing a lot of independent learning. Um, but I quickly realized that distance learning was an opportunity for me to really rethink not only what I was teaching, but how I was teaching it, and also an opportunity for me to really explore some of the goals that I've had floating around in my head for a really long time, but haven't actually had the time to realize. So this week, some of the goals that I've been focusing on are trying to build in even more opportunities for my students to become independent learners. So what that looks like is I've been working on identifying more places where we can introduce choice, student choice. I've also tried to make for more opportunities for students to receive more varied feedback and to give feedback to their peers in more meaningful ways. So a lot of the materials that I'm going to highlight today represent those goals. The first is the set of learning goals that I developed, and it's very much a work in progress. And what this represents is a move away from a long list of very specific learning goals that I used to give my students for each unit that we cover, in favor of a really simplified set of overarching learning goals that should be relevant to all or almost all of the units that we cover. And I have also developed this method here for students to assess their progress on these learning goals. Something I'm thinking is this might be part of a development of a portfolio, having students assess themselves maybe at the midpoint or at the end of each unit, and collect that and then maybe reflect back on it at the end of the year. Something else I've worked on this week is trying to design more opportunities that allow for student choice and student creativity and alternate ways for students to show their skill. What this represents here is a summative assessment that's similar to something I've done for several years in my class. For the last few years, during second semester, we've sort of layered our study of solution chemistry onto a study of the chemistry of the Flint, Michigan water crisis. And so what this summative assessment represents is an opportunity for students to choose one or two topics within that and really dive further in. At the end, there would be a presentation of learning to our school community that would include parents and other teachers and maybe even some peers. Students would get a chance to explain some of the chemistry as well as some of the socioeconomic issues related to the Flint, Michigan water crisis. And students would have an element of choice in how they present this to the folks that attend the event. And finally, a third design challenge that I wanted to share is this discussion guide that I came up with. A big part of my class is working on particle diagrams. So one of the major goals of chemistry is to help students visualize particle level behavior and use it to explain macroscopic observable phenomena. So we spend a lot of time drawing particle diagrams, talking about particle diagrams, critiquing each other's particle diagrams, but I've never really developed a comprehensive guide for those discussions. Even though we have lots of discussions about particle diagrams, I've never really given students many guidelines on how that should happen. So what I came up with here is a set of guidelines for our particle diagram discussions. But something I thought would be really interesting to try, particularly in a distance learning course, is to have students actually do a discussion of particle diagrams asynchronously. So here you see a template where students would be given a question about observable phenomena that they would copy here. Then they would answer the question in words and also show a particle diagram to explain the macroscopic behavior. And then students could use the discussion guide to critique and offer feedback on those particle diagrams. So in terms of where I've ended up this week, I think most of my progress has come in the form of learning to trust my students more, give them more opportunities to show their creativity and exercise choice, and also trust them to give each other more meaningful feedback. I think one thing this course has really taught me is that the feedback does not need to come exclusively from me. It can and should come from from peer to peer. And that's always something I've tried to do in my classroom, but I don't think I've offered enough scaffolding and enough guidance to help the students think about how to offer meaningful feedback, and also think about how to assess their own feedback and how to use feedback they're given. Thanks for all your comments this week. I've really enjoyed working with everyone, and I hope our paths cross again soon.